The report was filed at 0300 hours, station time. Row 7 had filed 31 reports like it in his 200 years of observation work. He filed this one the same way he filed all the others, efficiently, without ceremony, the way you throw out food that has gone slightly bad. No drama, just disposal. Earth, third planet, Sol system, single inhabited body, population, approximately 8.1 billion, technology index, class 1, intraspecies conflict, ongoing unified planetary defense capability, negligible, threat rating, non-applicable, recommendation, harvest candidate, forward to Kreth expansion division for processing. He sent it, made himself a hot drink. The drink was from a world the Kreth had processed 7 years ago. Sweet, a little bitter at the back. He had a whole case of it because nobody was making more. He did not think about that. The Kreth fleet arrived on a Tuesday, 14,000 ships. The smallest one was 300 meter long. The largest, the command vessel, the Veldara, Veth's ship, the ship he had ridden into 23 first contacts and watched 23 civilizations fold like wet paper. That one was 11 kilometers from nose to engine burn, bigger than some mountains, quieter in the vacuum than a held breath. They came out of fold space at 0612 hours, Greenwich Mean Time, 40,000 kilometers above the equator, and they hung there in the dark above the blue planet like a second moon made of knives. Ambassador Veth stood at the viewport and looked down. He had seen planets like this before. Blue-green, thin cloud cover, oceans, the kind of planet that made species soft. Too much food, too much water, too much comfort. Species from planets like this tended to cry during surrender negotiations. One of them had fainted. Veth had the recording somewhere. He straightened his collar. This is routine, he told himself. His aide handed him the broadcast file, standard template. The same words, more or less, that had opened 23 surrender negotiations. Change the species name. Adjust the frequency range for whatever auditory organs the target had. Run it on a loop until they respond. Simple. Broadcast, Veth said. The signal hit Earth's atmosphere at 0613 hours and 14 seconds. By 0613 hours and 58 seconds, it had been received, decoded, and translated by 7 independent agencies across 4 continents. The translation took 44 seconds because the Kreth, either from arrogance or simple habit, had included a cipher key in the header. They had been doing this for so long that the possibility of a species that could not decode it simply hadn't occurred to them. By 0614 hours, it was in the hands of the United Earth Defense Council. The UADC had been meeting in emergency session since 0603 hours when the fold space event was first detected. 11 minutes of prep before the call came in. 11 minutes of people walking very fast down corridors and sitting down very hard in chairs and pulling up screens and not quite looking at each other. The council chamber was underground, had been since it was built. 700 miners of granite between it and whatever might come from the sky. Commander Yara Osai read the translation once. Then she set it down. She rubbed her left thumb, slow and circular, against the pad of her index finger. 3 seconds. A small private count that nobody in that room would have recognized as the thing she did when a decision was going to cost lives, and she was making it anyway. Defense posture? Someone asked. Already in it, she said. They're asking for full surrender, planetary. I read it. She looked at the readout. 14,000 ships. She didn't flinch. She was not the kind of person who flinched at numbers. Numbers were just the shape of the problem. Get me a 4-hour window, she said. For what? To send a response. The room was quiet for a moment. Someone at the far end of the table said, gently, like they were talking to someone standing on a ledge, Commander, the fleet alone represents a firepower index of... I know what it represents. She looked up. Her voice hadn't moved. Same volume as always, same flat, precise delivery. The voice of a woman who had spent so long giving orders that inflection felt like a waste of energy. 4 hours, then we respond. Get the division commanders on the line. Start the clock. She stood up, walked to the door, paused, hand on the frame, because one more thing occurred to her. And kill the civilian frequencies. All of them. News, social, entertainment, everything. That's going to cause panic. No, she said. It's going to cause confusion.
Panic is what happens when people know what's coming. Confusion just means they don't have their phones. She left. Corporal James Okoro, patched to everyone who mattered, was eating instant noodles when the alert hit. Chicken flavor. Third packet of the week, which told you something about either the supply chain or his life choices. He was sitting in the duty station at CFB Cold Lake, Northern Alberta, feet up on the console, watching the screensaver drift across the secondary monitor, thinking about absolutely nothing, which was his preferred state of existence. The alert was a sound he'd never heard in 2 years of active service. Not the usual alarm, not the drill tones, something lower, something that came up through the floor before it came through the speakers. He put the noodles down, looked at the primary screen. The screen had a number on it. He looked at the number for a long time. Then he picked the noodles back up, ate the last 3 forkfuls because cold noodles were a waste, and he wasn't an animal. And then he put the container in the recycling and pulled up the command feed. 14,000 ships. He read it twice. Then he pulled out the small battered notebook he kept in his left breast pocket. Green cover. Half the pages water-warped from a river crossing in his first year that nobody was supposed to talk about. And he wrote, Tuesday, 0607 hours. Aliens. Cold Lake. Still no good coffee. He clicked the pen closed, stood up, went to work. 4 hours and 6 minutes after the Kreth broadcast reached Earth, a single signal went up. Military frequency, encrypted, but the encryption was simple, almost insultingly so, and the Kreth comms team decoded it in under 2 minutes. They'd been expecting something, probably a counteroffer, begging maybe. Some species tried to negotiate. The Kreth had a whole section in the processing handbook for negotiations. The signal decoded to 7 words. Received. Preparing response. WADC Veth read it. He read it again. Then he handed it back to his aide and said, Log it. And went back to looking out the viewport. Row 7, monitoring from his observation post in the outer system, logged his own note at 10:19 hours. Subject species has acknowledged communication. Response time, 4.1 hours. Message content, non-committal. Tone, neutral. Compliance trajectory, 94.7%. No unusual indicators. Awaiting formal response. Estimated surrender, 48 to 72 hours. He underlined 94.7%. He had been right about the compliance trajectory on every single Class 1 species he'd ever assessed. He made another hot drink. What Row 7 noticed at 10:34 hours was not in his handbook. He was running a routine sweep of Earth's communication spectrum, something he did every 20 minutes, just to watch the panic evolving. Because panic had a shape, a rhythm, a way of spreading from population center to population center, like fire jumping between trees, when he realized there was nothing to watch. The spectrum was empty. Not damaged, not jammed, empty, like someone had reached over and turned a dial. He checked his instruments, ran a diagnostic, checked again. Every civilian broadcast frequency on every continent had gone dark at the same moment. He had never seen this before, not once. In 31 civilizations, species under threat did not go quiet. They screamed. They broadcast prayers and last messages and desperate political speeches. They filled the air with noise, the way wounded animals filled the air with sound, because noise was proof of life, and life was the one argument nobody stopped making until they couldn't anymore. Earth had turned off its noise, all of it, together, at once. Row 7 sensory filaments, the thin, sensitive organs along his neck that processed emotional atmosphere in the air, a feature his species had evolved for social reading, and which had absolutely no useful function in the vacuum of space, but which activated anyway when his nervous system registered something it didn't have a category for, retracted fully against his skin. He opened a new log entry. Anomaly detected. Earth civilian communication spectrum offline. Not disrupted. Deactivated.
coordinated shutdown across all surfaces simultaneously. Behavior inconsistent with Class 1 threat response profile. Logging as anomaly. Will monitor. He highlighted the word anomaly, stared at it. Below him, 40,000 kilometers away and falling, the night side of Earth looked the same as it always had. City lights in clusters, the long dark between them, the soft glow of coastlines, a planet sleeping. His instruments caught it first. Thermal blooms, small. Initially, then more, then many, rising from every continent in a pattern that was not random, and was not panic, and was not the shape of a species losing its mind under pressure. It was the shape of things waking up. Engines. His instruments told him, thousands of them, not warming up, already warm, already running, as though they had been running, quietly. Below the threshold of routine scans, pointed at the sky, for a very long time. Addendum. Row 7 typed. He looked at the thermal map. He looked at it for a long time. Addendum. Revising anomaly classification. Earth is not panicking. Earth is not negotiating. Earth is I do not have a word for this. Earth is becoming something. I am going to need more instruments. He sent an emergency data request to Council Station. Then he did something he had not done in 200 years of observation work. He locked his station door. Aboard the Veldar ambassador Veth was eating dinner when his comms officer came in. The comms officer was named Vreth. Young. Good at the job, had the slightly pinched expression of someone who had learned to deliver bad news carefully. Sir? Earth's civilian frequencies have gone offline. Vreth chewed. Offline how? All of them, sir, simultaneously. About 40 minutes ago. Vreth set his fork down. All of them? Yes, sir. Vreth thought about this. In his experience, when a species went quiet before a surrender, it meant one of two things. Either the government had collapsed and there was nobody left to broadcast, or the military had taken over communications entirely in preparation for issuing a planet-wide order. Either way, it was usually the end of their resistance, not the beginning of it. They're preparing to comply, he said. That's one interpretation, sir. He looked at Vreth. What's another? The young officer held his hands in the configuration that meant, in Kareth body language, I am about to say something I don't have enough information to be certain of, and I want the record to show I said so. I don't know, sir. That's the problem. Vreth picked his fork back up. Monitor and report, he said. We'll have their formal response within the day. Vreth left. Vreth ate the rest of his dinner. Outside the viewport, Earth turned slowly on its axis, the way it had been doing for 4.12 billion years, at a speed and with a patience that suggested it did not particularly care what was in orbit above it. Vreth did not notice this. He was not the kind of person who noticed things like that. At 0300 hours, station time, Row 7 filed a second report. This one was 2 lines long, revising Earth threat classification. Insufficient data for new rating. Recommend all Council observers in the Sol sector increase monitoring frequency. He paused, added a third line. I may have been wrong about this one. He almost deleted it. It was not the kind of thing you put in official reports. Too personal. Too uncertain. Not the language of 200 years of clean, correct, authoritative observation work. He left it in, sent the report, made another hot drink, sat down, watched Earth turn. Down below, in the dark, in 100 underground facilities on 6 continents, in mobile, units in forests and deserts and 3 submarines running dark and silent in the deep Pacific, the things that had been warming up for a very long time, finished warming up. Pachacoro, in his carrier unit somewhere over the Atlantic, wrote one more line in his notebook. They have no idea what they knocked on. He clicked the pen closed. Outside, the stars were very bright, very many, very quiet. For now, Ambassador Veth was eating breakfast when the war started. Eggs, the Kreth equivalent, pale yellow, slightly gelatinous, and a reading tablet propped against his water glass displaying the morning's political summaries. none of which he was really reading because he had read 10,000 political summaries in his career, and they all said the same three things in slightly different orders. He was bored. He was profoundly, cosmically, structurally bored in the way that only a man who has won 23 times can be bored. Victory had a shape after a while. It was the shape of a Tuesday morning. Eggs, a reading tablet, the distant hum of a fleet so large it bent gravitational calculations. His comms officer knocked. "Sir, Earth has gone active." Veth turned a page on his tablet. "Define active. Launches, sir. Multiple. We're still categorizing." "Missiles?" Not exactly, sir." He looked up then. Not because he was worried, because not exactly from a comms officer was the kind of grammatical formation that required a face behind it. "Come in," he said. Row 7 saw it first. He saw it because his instruments were better, because he had spent the last 4 hours adding instruments, because something about the thermal map of Earth had crawled under his carapace and refused to leave. Because he was, and he would not write this in his report, but he felt it in the thinning of his breath, afraid. The launches came from everywhere, not from military installations only, not from known defense sites or the locations his preliminary survey had flagged as weapon-adjacent. Everywhere. Forests, deserts, the open ocean, underground, punching up through ground that showed no surface signature at all until the moment it opened. He watched the map, and it was like watching a planet turn itself inside out, like watching something that had been folded very small, very carefully, for a very long time, unfold all at once. He started counting. He stopped counting. His instruments did it for him. Fourth, 200,000, and some number of units after that, which the counter was still calculating when the first wave hit the Kreth fleet. Point defense was the Kreth's best technology. They had spent 400 years refining it, targeting systems that could track a 2-meter projectile at 40,000 km. Reaction times measured in fractions of a second, overlapping fields of fire that left no gap larger than a standard shuttle. In 23 engagements, no incoming ordnance had ever reached a Kreth hull. This was not ordnance. Each unit was the size of a closed fist. Each unit had no metal in it, no explosive payload, no heat signature above ambient. They came in loose, irregular formations that the targeting system's pattern recognition software cycled through 17 classification attempts on in the first 2 seconds, landing on debris field before the software was overridden by the officer watching the screen, who said, very quietly, "That debris field is accelerating." Point defense killed 200,000 of them in the first 8 seconds. It killed them efficiently and precisely, and it killed exactly as many as its overlapping fields of fire could process in that window. And then the remaining 4 million crossed the threshold and hit the fleet, not to destroy, to eat. Patch felt it before he understood it. He was in a transport carrier, mid-Atlantic, strapped into the jump seat with 11 other soldiers who were all performing various versions of the same act, staring at something near their feet, breathing in a particular way, not talking. The carrier was dark except for the instrument panels and a thin strip of emergency lighting along the floor that turned everyone's face the color of old bruises. The readout on his wrist unit changed. Numbers, ship counts, status indicators flipping from green to yellow to red in patterns that started slow and then didn't. He watched it for a while, pulled out his notebook. 0918 hours. First contact plus 4 hours. The maths are happening. Don't look at the maths if you want to sleep ever again. He clicked the pen. The soldier next to him, a woman named Castillo, Sao Paulo, never spoke unless she had something worth saying, which made her the finest human being Patch had personally encountered in 2 years of service, looked at the wrist readout and said very quietly, 3,000. He looked at her. 3,000 gone, she said. He looked at his own readout. She wasn't wrong. 3,114. Kreth ships had gone dark, not destroyed, not burning. Dark, silent, blind and deaf and full of crew who were trying to understand what was happening to their sensor arrays, their communication systems, their navigation beacons. trying to find the things taking them apart with hands that could not feel anything smaller than a standard tool. The units were smaller than a standard tool. Patch wrote, "Gnats. They sent gnats. 4 million gnats." He stared at that for a moment. "We sent gnats to fight the fleet that came to end us." Wild. Veth reached the command deck in time to watch the 6th ship go dark. He stood at the main display and he watched the status indicators. And he was very still in the way that predators are still. Not calm, not frozen, but concentrated. Everything pulled inward toward the calculations happening behind his eyes. "Get me a count," he said. "Sir, the count is get it. 3,400, sir. In the first." The officer checked his panel. "In the first 40 seconds. Veth looked at the display. The display showed 14,000 green indicators when they arrived. It showed right now just over 10,000. The red ones were not exploding. They were not fighting back. They were just going red, quietly, one after another, like someone walking down a very long corridor turning off lights. "What is hitting us?" he said. "We don't. What is hitting us?" "Something small, sir. We cannot get a clear scan. Whatever they're made of, it's not reading. They're going through the point defense because point defense wasn't designed for..." The officer stopped, rearranged his words. "We weren't designed for this." Veth absorbed that. "Options. We could withdraw to high orbit out of launch range. Then they have the atmosphere." "No. We could." The display pinged. A 7th ship went dark, then an 8th, then 3 more at once. Row 7 had stopped writing notes. He was just watching. He had a secondary monitor running, displaying his own report from 4 hours ago, the one with 94.7% underlined. He had written it with the comfortable certainty of a man who has been right 31 times, and it sat on the screen next to the tactical feed, and the juxtaposition was doing something to him that he didn't have a clean word for. He watched Earth's second wave launch. Different profile, larger, faster, clear metal signatures. These ones the sensors could see coming, which he initially registered as a correction, an improvement in targeting odds. Then he understood what they were for. The first wave had eaten the eyes, the ears, the voices. The second wave was for the ships that couldn't see it coming. He watched 10,000 Kreth vessels try to coordinate a response with no sensors, no communications, no navigation data. He watched them fire into each other twice. He watched 3 ships attempt to run and fold into each other in the dark. He opened a new log. Hour 1, Kreth fleet compromised. Earth losses, none confirmed. Tactical analysis, Earth did not attack. Earth attacked the fleet's ability to understand what was happening to it. There is a meaningful difference. I am still working out what the difference means. He paused. The difference is this. You can fight something that is trying to kill you. You cannot fight something that is trying to confuse you. Because confusion is not a position. You cannot hold a line against it. You cannot retreat from it. You are simply inside it. The Kreth are inside it. He saved the entry, opened a new one. Hour 1. Addendum. Earth has lost 14 personnel. 14 in 1 hour against this fleet. He stared at the number. 14. He could not make it mean what it should mean. A number that small in a context this large did not resolve into sense. It sat in his mind like a stone dropped into water that refused to sink. Just floating there, turning slowly, waiting for him to understand something he did not yet have the frame for. He sent an emergency transmission to the Galactic Council. It contained coordinates. One word. Watch. Patch's carrier broke atmosphere at 10:41 hours. He felt it. The shudder, the pressure change, the sound shifting from nothing to something as air happened around them again. The strip lighting flickered. Someone across the carrier said something in a language he didn't catch. Castillo was asleep. She could sleep through anything. He had once watched her sleep through a fire alarm and a subsequent actual small fire. He envied that. His wrist readout showed 4,400 now. He hadn't meant to look. He'd made a decision not to look. The maths would still be happening whether he watched it or not. He looked anyway. 4,400 Kreth ships gone dark or gone entirely in 1 hour. He thought about his grandfather, who had a saying that Patch had always thought was just old man talk. The kind of compressed wisdom that sounds good and means nothing when you're young and think you understand the shape of the world already. Don't start a fight with someone who has been waiting for you. He wrote it in the notebook, looked at it. Thought, Granddad, you had no idea. The carrier banked. Through the small porthole across the cabin, he had a view of nothing. Of the wall, of Castillo's sleeping face. Someone else had a porthole with a view, and he heard them say something. Not words, just a sound. The particular catch in the throat note of a person seeing something they do not have the vocabulary for yet. What? Patch said. The soldier with the porthole, new transfer name Patch read, Okonkwo. Lagos liked him, which meant they would either get along perfectly or drive each other insane. Looked back. The sky, Okonkwo said. What about it? It's full. Patch undid his strap, stood up, leaned across the carrier to the porthole. Outside, in the upper atmosphere, the second wave was rising. He had known the numbers. He had watched the readouts. Numbers and readouts are a way of knowing something without feeling it, and he had been relying on that distinction for the last 2 hours. But here was the thing itself, not a readout. The sky full of it, rising in columns from every direction he could see, spreading into the black at the edge of the atmosphere. The geometry of it so large that it bent perspective, that it made the horizon feel like a detail rather than a boundary, that it made the planet below feel like it was reaching up, like something that had been pushed down for a very long time was standing. He looked at it for a long time. Okonkwo said, "You know what it looks like?" "Don't say it." "It looks like." "I know what it looks like." He went back to his seat, sat down, picked up the notebook, wrote. They came 400 light years to die confused. Their mistake wasn't coming. It was coming certain. He underlined certain, clicked the pen. Outside, 40,000 kilometers above him, the fleet that had arrived certain was becoming a different shape entirely. One ship at a time, each one quiet, each one dark. Like a man who walks into a room absolutely sure of himself and finds when he gets there that the room has been rearranged, that the lights are off, that the floor is somewhere other than where floors are supposed to be. Like that, except the room was Earth. And Earth had been rearranging the furniture for a very long time. Patch's boots hit alien soil at Aero 340 hours local. He stood there for a second, just stood. The ground was the color of old rust, and it gave slightly underfoot, like packed sand over something softer. And the sky above it was wrong. Not wrong bad, just wrong in the way that things are wrong when your whole life a sky has been one color. And now it isn't. Veth 4's sun was further away than Sul, older. It lit the planet the way a lamp with a failing bulb lights a room. Enough to see. Not enough to trust. He looked at it. Pulled out the notebook. 0340 hours, Veth 4. Alien sun. Still no good coffee. Ground feels like walking on a bruise. He clicked the pen. Castillo landed behind him. Boots finding the rust ground without looking. The way she did everything. Like the world was expected to arrange itself correctly. And usually did. She looked at the sky. She said. That was her whole review of a planet 40 light years from everything she had ever known. Patch loved that about her. The Galactic Council watched through Row 7's feed. All 47 of them. This was not normal procedure. Council observation sessions were filed, archived, reviewed later by specialists who wrote papers that other specialists read and filed and reviewed. They were not attended live. They were not watched the way you watch something you are afraid to look away from. But Row 7's emergency transmission coordinates watch had moved through Council Station at 200 hours, and by Euro 230 the chamber was full. Nobody had called the session. They just came. They stood at the feed and watched a human fleet follow the retreating Kreth into fold space, And nobody said anything because nobody had a frame for what they were seeing, and you do not comment on something you don't have a frame for. You just watch. The eldest delegate, So Varon, 1,400 years of service, had watched species born and burned, kept her emotional register so flat. The junior delegate sometimes checked her vital signs, stood in the back corner with her hands folded and her eyes on the feed. Row 7, watching his own feed in his locked observation station, pulled up the council chamber's secondary monitor. He watched them watching. He had never seen So Varon's filaments move. They were moving now, small, barely visible, the way a person's hands move when they're trying not to show that their hands are shaking. He logged this, did not know what to do with it, logged it anyway. The plan was not in any military doctrine the Kreth had on record for Class 1 species. The plan was not in any military doctrine the Galactic Council had on record for any species. The human fleet did not stop at the edge of Kreth space. It did not establish a perimeter. It did not demand terms. It did not do the thing that every species in recorded history had done when they pushed an aggressor back to their own border, which was stop. Because the border meant something. Because borders are the line between we defended ourselves and we became something else. The human fleet crossed the border 40 light years from Earth, chasing a retreating force into their own staging system, and they crossed it without slowing down. The council chamber made a sound. Not words, just sound. The collective exhale of 47 species who had, until this moment, been managing the situation into a shape they understood. Row 7 was already typing. Hour 6. Earth counter-incursion confirmed. Fleet has entered Kreth staging system Veldara 3. 3 planets with military infrastructure. Weapons, shipyards, factories currently producing additional fleet units. Analysis pending. He stopped. Stared at the feed. Earth is not bombing the factories. Patch's unit moved through the factory floor in a line. Not fast, not slow. The pace of people who have thought about this. Not here, not tonight. Somewhere before. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere it was planned. The factory was enormous. Kreth scale. The ceiling was so high it had its own weather. A thin cold up there that wasn't quite cloud, but wasn't not cloud either. The machines were running when they arrived. Still running. The workers, not soldiers, the civilian technical staff, had left in a way that suggested they left fast, but also organized, which told Patch something about the kind of species the Kreth were underneath the fleet. The machines made a sound like a city breathing. He'd expected more. He didn't know. More resistance, more something. Instead, there was just the enormous breathing room, and his unit spread out across it in the practiced geometry of people who'd trained for exactly this. And he found himself doing the thing they'd been told to do. He started taking it apart. Panel by panel, component by component, hands and tools and careful deliberate work, not destroying, cataloging first, then removing. The engineers moved ahead of his unit, identifying, tagging, and behind them came the loaders. And behind the loaders came the haulers, and it was the most organized thing he had ever been part of, which was saying something because the Nigerian army had once organized a 40-car convoy through Lagos at rush hour, and that had also been impressive. Actually not different from a kid taking apart a clock. Commander Osei's message went to Veth 4's garrison at 0600 hours. She wrote it herself. Did not pass it to comms to dress up or flatten out. It was already flat. Her voice was always flat. The message was, "You have 6 hours to evacuate your civilians. Military personnel may surrender or leave. We are not here for your people. We are here for your infrastructure." The clock started when you read this. Commander Y. Osei Wedsi. She sat in the temporary command post, a prefab unit, 3 rooms, A folding table, a coffee maker that Sergeant Adebayo had carried personally from Lagos because some things were non-negotiable, and she waited. Her aide said, "You think they'll go?" She picked up her coffee. "Yes." "How do you know?" She thought about this, not because she was uncertain, because she was trying to find the version of the answer that was worth saying out loud. "Because they're not stupid," she said. "They made a stupid decision. That's different." Her aide considered this. "And if they don't go?" She set the coffee down, rubbed her left thumb. 2 seconds. "Then we made the offer," she said. They went. 5 hours and 58 minutes after the message arrived, the last Kreth military transport lifted from Veth 4's surface. Row 7 tracked it from his station. One blip among many, and he watched it go. And he watched the planet below go still, empty. He pulled up the thermal map. Human activity, ongoing. Not weapon signatures, not the profile of bombardment or seizure, or the particular heat shape of a species marking territory. The profile of people working. Still taking it apart, still loading it, still moving through buildings and down corridors and across factory floors with the steady, organized intention of a species that had decided to take something home and was going to finish the job before it left. So Varen in the council chamber said, "They're not bombing." Nobody answered. It wasn't a question. "They gave them 6 hours," she said. Still not a question. She was watching the feed. Her filaments had gone still again, but still in a different way than before. Not flat, not the professional stillness of 1/400 years of composed observation, the stillness of recalculation. "They could have ended this system," a delegate on her left said. "They have the capability. I've run the—" "I know," she said. "Then why?" "I don't know." She turned from the feed for the first time since the session started, looked at the room. 47 species, 47 sets of eyes, sensory organs, filaments, photoreceptors. All of them doing variations of the same thing she was doing, trying to put Earth in a box. "They're not interested in this planet," she said. "They're interested in what was built here, and they gave the inhabitants time to leave." Row 7, watching the secondary monitor, wrote, "Sovereign does not say things she hasn't thought through." She waved him down without looking at him. "As you were, Corporal." He sat back down. She walked into the building. He watched the door for a moment, then looked back out at the factory district. The haulers were still moving. The sky was doing the thing it had been doing all day. That old lamp color. That light that felt like it was apologizing for something. He thought about his grandfather again. Not the saying this time. Just the man. Old house in Sur-Alaire. Walls covered in photographs of people Patch had never met, family that predated photographs, a whole chain of people who had survived things that should have killed them, and had somehow produced, at the end of the chain, a 23-year-old corporal eating a protein bar on an alien planet 40 light years from the street, where his grandfather had grown his tomatoes. He thought, "Granddad, you would not believe this Tuesday." Then he thought, "You would absolutely believe this Tuesday." Castillo sat down next to him. They watched the haulers for a while. "You know what they thought?" she said. "Which part?" "All of it. Coming here. The whole thing." She chewed her own protein bar. "They looked at us and saw a species that couldn't agree on anything. Different countries, different languages, fighting each other. Couldn't possibly coordinate. Yeah. They weren't wrong, technically. No, we just..." She stopped, thought about it. "We coordinate when it matters." Patch nodded, wrote in the notebook. "Granddad used to say, don't start a fight with someone who has nothing left to lose." These Kreth started a fight with 8 billion people who had everything to lose. Same thing, turns out. When everything's on the line, even people who disagree about everything agree about that. He stared at that, added, "Maybe especially then." The ceasefire request came at 2100 hours. It was formal, correctly formatted, all the diplomatic codes in the right places. Whoever drafted it on the Kreth side had done it properly, carefully, the way you do something when you want the record to show you did it right. It reached the UED CAC at 2100 hours and 11 seconds. The UED's response went out at 21:11 hours, 11 minutes. Not 72 hours, not a day, not a political meeting with 17 subcommittees, 11 minutes. The response was 5 words. Received, we'll finish first. UEDC in the council chamber, the delegate who had been most vocal, a Tresh named Orvek, young, experienced enough to have opinions, but not enough to know when to keep them, said, "That's not a ceasefire response, that's a schedule," said Sovereign. He looked at her. "They're telling the Kreth when this will end," she said. Not asking, telling. "When they're finished taking what they came for, they'll go home." She turned back to the feed. "They are keeping their word about the civilians. They will keep their word about this. You sound like you respect them. I'm afraid of them," she said. The room went quiet. Sovereign, 1,400 years, 31 species observed, wars witnessed, civilizations catalogued. The woman for whom the concept of afraid had become, across 14 centuries, a largely theoretical category. "Not because of the weapons," she said before anyone could ask. "Not because of the ships or the drones or the capability." She looked at the feed. Humans moving through an alien factory in the dark. Careful, organized, thorough, taking what they wanted and leaving everything else. "Because they know exactly what they're doing," she said, "and exactly when to stop." Row 7, alone in his locked station, did not write anything for a long time. Then, addendum, final note before I sleep. They could have ended a species today. They sent a schedule instead. He saved it, looked out the viewport. Earth's sun was a dot from here, a very ordinary star, one of several 100 billion in this galaxy alone, most of which hosted nothing, some of which hosted things that burned bright for a century and collapsed. A few of which hosted things that had lasted long enough to reach the stars, one of which hosted this. He turned off the light, slept badly, dreamed in the formless Row 7 way of a planet rearranging furniture in the dark. Getting it exactly right before anyone arrived, like it had been expecting company for a very long time. The list was 2,241 names long. OC read it the way she read everything, straight through, no skipping. No scanning ahead. Each name got the same count of time, not equal time, the same time. The distinction mattered to her in a way she had never explained to anyone and would not start now. It took 3 hours and 14 minutes. When she finished, she closed the file, sat. The coffee had been cold for 2 hours. She drank it anyway. Patch came home on a Wednesday. Lagos. The airport smelled like diesel and fruit, and the particular humid weight of air that had been breathed by too many people for too long, and he walked through arrivals with his bag over one shoulder and his notebook in his breast pocket. And he found his mother at the barrier before she found him, which is how it always went. She had a talent for looking everywhere at once, and he had a talent for seeing her before she turned. She turned. He raised one hand. She walked to him. She didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. She put one hand on the side of his face, the way she had done since he was 3 years old and had come home with a cut above his eye from a fall she hadn't seen. The specific touch of a woman taking inventory. He was there. He was all there. She took her hand back. "Come," she said. "I made rice." He followed her out into the heat. The jollof was better than anything on Veth 4. He would not have said that in front of Castillo, who had opinions about Brazilian cooking that she defended with the energy of someone who had never considered the possibility of being wrong. But it was true, and he held it privately, like a warm thing in his chest. His mother sat across from him and watched him eat. This was her version of a debriefing. She had never asked him about his service, not in 2 years, not in a single call, not once. She asked about his sleep, his food, his feet, because her theory of the human body was that if those three things were managed, everything else would eventually sort itself out. And he had decided she was probably right. She asked, "You're thin." "Little bit." "How's the food up there?" He looked at her. She looked back. Perfectly clear, perfectly unbothered. Up there, like he'd been posted to a buha. "It's fine," he said. She refilled his bowl without asking. He ate. Outside, the street did what Lagos streets do in the early evening. Noise building in layers. A generator somewhere. Music from a window 2 floors up. Someone laughing at something. The city perpetually performing its own existence like it needed the audience to confirm it was real. He had been 40 light years away. It had been 11 weeks. The street sounded exactly the same. He thought, some things don't update. Some things just stay. He did not write that in the notebook. Some things were for the notebook, and some things were for inside, and the line between them was a line he had drawn himself and maintained carefully, and would not explain if asked. The Galactic Council convened at 900 hours station time, 47 species. The chamber had a capacity of 60 delegates, and it was using all 60 seats, which had not happened in Row 7's recorded institutional memory. He was present in observer capacity, which meant he sat to the left of the main floor, in a chair that was slightly too small for him, and took notes. He was always taking notes. He had stopped trusting himself to remember things correctly. The first item on the agenda was reclassification, not Earth's classification, everyone's. The delegate from the Tresh opened it. Young Orvek, who had been almost vocal in the last session and had spent the intervening weeks apparently deciding to become fully vocal. Every Class 1 assessment in this council's database was built on the same model. The model is wrong. We are requesting a full audit of every civilization currently rated non-threatening. Silence. Not the silence of disagreement. The silence of a room full of species who had all, privately, in their own stations and ships and home offices, already run the same calculation and arrived at the same place, and were relieved that someone else said it first. "How many assessments?" someone asked. 412. The silence changed shape. "We cannot," someone said, "reclassify 412 civilizations on the basis of what?" Orvek said. "On the basis of having been completely wrong about one? On the basis of the fact that our threat model does not account for." He looked at his notes, which Row 7 suspected was a prop, because Orvek did not look like someone who needed notes. Accumulated historical trauma, coordinated planetary psychology, or the cognitive profile of a species that has survived itself for 300,000 years. He was quoting Row 7's report. Row 7 made a note about that. "We need time," someone said. "Every Class 1 species in this database has less time than we thought," Orvek said. "That's the point." So Varen, who had not spoken, spoke. "The audit begins today," she said. That was it. The item closed. The Kreth sent their peace terms through the Standard Council channel at 1400 hours. The format was correct. The seals were in order. It had the exhausted precision of a document produced by people who were used to winning, and were now, for the first time, writing something else, and were making very sure it was right. Because being right about the paperwork was the only dignity still available to them. The Council expected Earth's response to be territorial. That was the word that cycled through the Chamber's informal conversations in the hours before it arrived. Territorial. Species that one wanted land or resources or formal submission, or some combination of the three that could be arranged into a monument to the fact of the winning. Earth's terms arrived at 1600 hours. 3 points. Row 7 read them. Read them again. Wrote them in his notes verbatim, because he did not trust paraphrase to hold what they were. 1. Return all surveillance data collected during pre-contact period. 2. Grant Earth observer status in the Galactic Council. 3. No contact with Earth for 50 years unless contact is initiated by Earth. That was it. No territory. No reparations. No formal Kreth submission ceremony of the kind the Tresh had demanded from the Velmarin after the Outer Reach conflict, which had involved 17 symbolic acts and a public reading of a document of culpability that took 4 hours and was broadcast on 7 frequencies. 3 sentences. Orvek read them and said, "This is a joke." So Varan said, "It isn't. They won. They could take. They don't want it," she said. "Then what do they want?" She was quiet for a moment. "To be left alone," she said. "To become whatever they're going to become without us watching." The chamber sat with that. "And the 50 years?" someone said. "Insurance," Row 7 said. Everyone looked at him. He was not supposed to speak in session. He was an observer. He spoke anyway. "They're not afraid of us coming back. They demonstrated that clearly enough. The 50 years is space, room. They want to grow without having to explain themselves." He looked at his notes. "They showed us what they are under pressure. Now they want time to figure out what they are without it." The chamber was quiet. Then Sovereign said, "Accept all 3. Nobody argued. Osei was in her office when the terms were formally accepted. Her aide knocked, told her. She nodded, said, "Thank you." The aide left. She sat. The office was almost empty. She had been packing for 2 days, slow, methodical. The kind of packing that is also a kind of accounting. Books, documents, 3 citations in frames she had never hung. A plant that had somehow survived 11 months of irregular watering, which she respected enormously. And the photo. It was near the bottom of the second box, which is where things go that you're not ready to see, but also not ready to leave behind. Her daughter, age 7, standing in the backyard of the Accra house, holding a telescope she had made herself out of cardboard tubes and the lenses from a pair of broken binoculars, holding it up at the sky, eyes squinted, completely serious. The expression of someone who has decided that the sky is a problem to be solved, and she is the one who will solve it. Osei picked up the photo, held it, did not think about the 2,241 names. She had already done that. 3 hours and 14 minutes of doing that. Whatever needed to happen inside her after that had started happening and would keep happening, and did not require her attention, or her presence, or her permission. She thought about the telescope, cardboard and broken glass. Her daughter had seen something in the sky she wanted to get closer to. She did not wait for the right equipment. She built the wrong equipment and used it anyway. Osei put the photo in her bag, stood up, looked at the empty walls, turned off the light. Row 7 filed his report at 2300 hours. It was the longest he had ever written, longer than the cross-species behavioral study he had contributed to in his 43rd year. Longer than the Velmarin conflict documentation, longer than the cumulative notes from his first decade in observation work. He almost cut the last paragraph. Not because it was wrong, because it was the most personal thing he had ever put in an official document, and he had spent 200 years keeping his official documents the same temperature as his unofficial ones, which was low, controlled, correct. He left it in. Note final. During the closing stages of the engagement, 4 Earth weapon systems were fully charged, targeted, and held. The targets were Kreth population centers. The systems had confirmed firing solutions. Earth held them for 40 minutes, then stood them down. I have run the analysis. Those 4 systems would have ended the Kreth as a species, not their fleet, not their military capacity. The species. Earth had the kill. They chose not to take it. I have observed 31 civilizations in 200 years, and I have watched species make the choice to spare an enemy exactly twice. Both times the restraint was tactical. Calculated mercy extended because ongoing existence was more useful than erasure. I cannot find the calculation Earth made. They gave civilians 6 hours to leave. They took the infrastructure and left the planet. They sent 3 peace terms and asked for 50 years of quiet. They had the kill, and they went home. I don't know what to do with this information. I am aware that not knowing what to do with information is not an appropriate way to close an official report. I am closing it this way anyway. He saved it, sent it, made a drink he didn't want, stood at the viewport. Somewhere in the dark, 40 light years away, Earth was a small blue point around an ordinary star. It was not doing anything visible from here. It was just existing, the way it had been existing for 4.12 billion years before the Creth, before the Council, before Row 7 had filed his first routine report and drunk his first cup of something that came from a world nobody was making it on anymore. He had that thought, and then he had a different thought, sharp and sideways, the kind of thought that arrives without announcing itself. They could have ended a species. They went home instead. He did not resolve this thought. There was no resolution available. It sat in him like the name of something he did not have a word for yet. Something that existed in the gap between the most dangerous thing he had ever seen and the most something. He stood at the viewport for a long time. Outside, the stars were the same stars they had always been. They looked different. He did not write that down. Some things were for inside. The signal left Earth at 0001 hours on a Thursday. Nobody announced it. No press conference, no political speech, no ceremonial countdown. Somewhere in a building that did not appear on public maps, someone pressed a key, and the thing that had been built. Over 6 months of quiet, careful, argument-filled work went out into the dark at the speed of light on every frequency the Galactic Council used, addressed to no one specifically, which meant everyone. Row 7 was asleep when it arrived. He felt it before he heard it. A vibration in the station's receiver array, a change in the ambient hum that his sleeping body registered as wrong but not danger. The way you feel a door close in another room without waking up. He woke up, looked at the receiver, looked at the origin coordinates, sat up. The transmission was 4 hours and 17 minutes long. He listened to the first 40 seconds, and then he stopped. Not because he didn't want to hear it, because he needed to be sitting differently. He moved from the cot to the chair at the main console, the proper chair, the one he sat in when he was working, when he was thinking, when the thing in front of him required the kind of attention you cannot give from somewhere comfortable. He started again from the beginning. It opened with music, not one kind, not an overture or a representative sample curated by committee to present a balanced cultural portrait. All of it. Stacked and layered and bleeding into each other. Something with drums that hit like a physical argument. And something with strings that hurt in the specific way that things hurt when they are beautiful, and you know they will end. And underneath both of those, something older. A single voice in a language Row 7's translator couldn't parse. Singing the way people sing when they think nobody is listening, which is the only way singing is ever true. It ran for 6 minutes. Then it cut. A child laughing. 3 seconds. Then a man's voice, low, telling a joke in a language Row 7 recognized. The one from the coastal region of the large western continent. The punchline was delivered and someone off mic laughed before it landed. The laugh of someone who already knew the joke and couldn't help it. Then that cut too. Row 7 stopped writing notes at the 11-minute mark. He had been trained to take notes. 200 years of training. You observe, you record, you file. The notes are the job. The notes are the only thing that outlasts you, and you are the only thing that outlasts the moment. So the chain is moment, observer, notes, record, time. He stopped. His hands stayed on the console. He just listened. A city after rain, someone running, not from anything. The sound of it was wrong for fear, toward something maybe, or just for the feeling of it. Feet on wet ground, breathing hard. The city opening up around the runner in the way cities do at night when most of the people have gone inside. Running because the body wanted to, because it could. A hospital room. Row 7 knew the acoustic signature of medical spaces. He had catalogued enough of them. The particular silence that is not empty, but held. A machine somewhere measuring something. And then, a hand. The sound of a hand, finding another hand in the dark. The small, unmistakable sound of fingers closing. And a voice saying nothing, saying only, present. Still here. Still here with you. Row 7's filaments extended fully. He had not felt that in a long time. He did not retract them. The transmission did not organize itself. This was the thing that kept catching him. Every diplomatic broadcast he had ever received from a species making first contact with the Council had structure. Introduction, credentials, cultural summary, political statement, request. The architecture of a species presenting itself as it wanted to be seen. This had no architecture. It had the shape of a life. Not one life, many. All of them cut together without explanation or transition. Each one ending before it resolved. Each one leaving a small, open space where the listener had to put something of themselves to fill it. A woman planting something in ground that was not good ground. Her hands working the soil with the focus of someone who has made a private bet with the future. I will do this now, and something will come of it later that I will not see. The patience of it. The absolute groundedness of it. A person deciding to participate in time on time's own terms. Row 7 did not have a word for what that made him feel. He was 200 years old. He thought he had words for most things. A funeral, rain on a roof, people singing something slow, communal. The kind of song that needs bodies in a room together to work. That does not exist in the version you sing alone. And underneath the singing, the sound of grief that was not trying to be anything other than what it was. Not composed, not performed, not managed, just present. Just grief being grief in a room full of people who were grieving together. Because the only alternative was grieving alone, and they had collectively decided against that. Then, a wedding. No pause between them. The same song, faster. Different words, same room. Row 7 understood then what Earth had done. Not a presentation, a confession. At 3 hours and 44 minutes, a crowd. Enormous. He could hear the size of it before he could understand it. The way a large number of bodies in one place changes the air, makes the air into something denser, something that carries differently. They were watching something. A game, his translator told him. A match. One side scored, or did the equivalent, and the crowd he had observed, 31 civilizations. He had been in cities when things went right for them, when the collective held its breath and then released it, when thousands of individuals became, for 30 seconds, one thing. He had never heard anything like this. It was not the volume, it was the quality. Pure, like a held note from an instrument with no name. Then it faded. The players moved again. The crowd settled back into many. A protest. He recognized the shape of it. People in a street, signs, voices raised, the organized chaos of a species arguing with itself in public because the alternative was accepting something it found unacceptable, not violent, loud, specific about what it wanted. The signs were in 6 different languages. The chanting was in 3. Somehow they were all saying the same thing, which was, this is wrong, and we will not pretend it is not wrong, and we will stand in this street in the rain until something changes. The rain was there again. It rained a lot in the transmission. Row 7 began to think rain was not incidental. 4 hours and 9 minutes. A backyard somewhere. Evening. Insects. The slow, low sound of a settlement cooling after heat. A child, small, recently walking, still at the stage where walking was an ongoing negotiation with gravity rather than an agreement. The child walked, fell, there was a breath. An adult nearby watching, not moving. The specific held breath of someone who has decided to let the falling happen because the getting up is the point. The child got up, walked, fell, got up. Row 7 realized he had been holding his breath too. He released it. The child walked 4 steps, 5, 6, and a wobble, and then 7, and then a sound from the adult. Not words. Something before words. The sound a body makes when it has been trying very hard not to celebrate too early and has just lost that fight. The child fell again, laughed, got up. Then Commander Osei's voice. He recognized it. He had listened to every UET broadcast from the engagement, Every command frequency intercept, 200 hours of her voice at the same controlled volume. The voice of a woman who had decided that tone was a resource, and she would not spend it. Same voice, same volume. We didn't want this war. We won it anyway. We could have gone further. We didn't. This is what we are. We are going to be out here now. We thought you should know us before you make any decisions. Silence. 4 hours and 17 minutes of transmission. And then, nothing. Just the carrier frequency. The signal still open. Earth still transmitting. Silence. The council chamber received it at 0900 hour station time. All 47 species. Nobody had called the session. They just came the same way they came for the battlefield, pulled by something that did not have a name yet. The feeling that this was not something to learn about later. They listened. Row 7 watched them on the secondary monitor. He watched Orvek, young, vocal, constitutionally unable to be still, sit completely still for 4 hours and 17 minutes. He watched delegates he had never seen touch each other. Small contact. A hand on an arm, a shoulder pressed to a shoulder, species that did not share physical space sharing it. He watched Sovereign. She was in the back corner, same corner as always, hands folded, the professional stillness of 400 years. At the child walking section, 4 hours and 9 minutes, her hands unfolded. She pressed them flat on the console in front of her. She looked at them like she was checking something. The session ended at 1418 hours. Nobody spoke for 40 seconds after the transmission closed. Then Sovereign said, to no one in particular, her voice doing something it had not done in any recorded session in Row 7's institutional memory. They grieve, a breath. They still grieve, and they plant things anyway. For 11 days, no species contacted Earth. Not the Kreth, not the Council, not the 17 civilizations that had been quietly upgrading their diplomatic monitoring of the Sol system since the engagement ended. Not the 3 species that had been composing formal introduction transmissions for 6 months and had been waiting for the right moment, 11 days. The silence was not fear. Row 7 was certain of this. He had heard fear silence before. The quiet of species that had received a threat and gone to ground. The held breath quiet of civilizations deciding whether to run or comply. He had logged that silence 31 times. This was different. This was the silence of 47 species sitting with something they had been handed and did not want to put down yet. The silence of not wanting to be the first one to speak because speaking would end it. Because the thing they had been given was complete in itself. And the correct response to a complete thing is not words, not immediately. First you sit with it. Patch didn't know about the silence until his mother told him. She had been watching the council feeds. She had, it turned out, been watching them since before he shipped out, which he suspected and had never asked about because some things you do not want confirmed. And she came into the kitchen on day 4 of the 11 and said without preamble while he was making eggs, "Nobody's talking." He looked up. "Out there," she said, after the broadcast. Nobody said anything. He considered this. "Good," he said. She looked at him. "They're thinking," he said. She watched him for a moment in the way she had always watched him. Inventory, assessment, the rapid calculation of a woman who had raised something she did not entirely understand and had made peace with that. She said. She sat down at the table. He made her eggs too. Row 7 filed his final report on day 12. He had been writing it across the 11 days of silence, a few lines at a time, the way you write something you are not ready to finish. Each day he added, each day he did not send it. On day 12, he finished the last paragraph and sent it before he could think about it further. The last paragraph, "I have observed 31 civilizations in 200 years. I have seen species discover fire, and species forget it. I have watched things that called themselves civilized do things that had no name. I have filed reports. I have drunk things made on worlds that don't make them anymore. I have been careful and correct, and I have measured threat by the shape of weapons and the size of fleets, and I have been, it turns out, measuring the wrong things the whole time. Earth sent us a child learning to walk. They sent us rain and a funeral, and a crowd going briefly insane because someone kicked something correctly. They sent us a hand in the dark and a woman planting trees she would never see. They sent it unencrypted on every frequency, addressed to no one, which meant everyone. They showed us what they are made of, not the weapons, not the fleet, the other thing, the thing underneath the weapons that makes the weapons make sense. The specific human terror of losing what they love and what they will do and how far they will go and how carefully they will stop because of it. Classification revised. New classification unclassifiable. Notes field. I don't have another word for it. I tried. Human will have to do. End of report. He sent it. Closed the console. Sat back. Outside the viewport, the stars were exactly what they had always been. Indifferent, numerous, old in a way that made everything else feel like a conversation happening in a room they hadn't noticed yet. He looked at them. He thought about the child. 6 steps. Wobble. Fall. Laugh. Up again. He thought about the adult's breath. The held then released sound of someone watching something small get up from a fall and go again. The involuntary celebration of it. The joy that arrived before the person decided to have it. He thought, that is the whole story maybe. Fall. Laugh. Up again. They've been doing it for 300,000 years. We mistook the falling for weakness. We didn't see the laughing. We never thought to look at what happened next. He sat with that for a long time. Outside, the stars. The ordinary star. 40 light years from here. The one that had been burning the same slow burn since before the council existed. Since before anyone was counting. The one that had watched from its unremarkable position in an unremarkable arm of an unremarkable galaxy, a species climb down from trees and look up. And decide that up was interesting, and go.